Welcome to Spooky Stories. I'm Milo, your guide through the chilling and the unknown. Here, we dive into terrifying tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Join our community of thrill seekers, and let's explore the darkness together. Are you ready to be scared? 1. It was a bitterly cold winter night, and for the first time, I was alone in the house. My parents had gone to visit relatives, leaving me to take care of our dog, Max. It felt strange to be the only one in the house, but I was determined to enjoy the solitude. By midnight, I had settled into the couch, watching TV, with Max curled up at my feet. Out of nowhere, I heard soft footsteps coming from upstairs. At first, I thought it was Max, so I called out to him, but he remained at my feet, his eyes fixated on the staircase. The steps grew louder, moving closer to the top of the stairs. A chill ran down my spine, but I brushed it off, thinking it was just the old house creaking in the cold. Then I heard it, a whisper, barely audible, calling my name. John. It was unmistakable. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could feel the blood rushing to my ears. Grabbing a knife from the kitchen, I started up the stairs, trying to steady my breathing. Each step creaked under my weight, echoing in the silence. The corridor was empty, but the door to my parents' room was ajar. I knew I had closed it before. The cold air hit me as I pushed the door open, knife in hand, ready to defend myself. The room was dark, and the sense of being watched was overwhelming. There was no one there, just an intense, bone-chilling cold. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every creak and groan of the house made my heart race. I sat in the living room, knife in hand, waiting for my parents to return. The hours dragged by, each minute feeling like an eternity. When they finally came back, I told them what had happened. They listened, concerned but skeptical. My father checked the entire house, but found nothing unusual. They reassured me that it was probably just my imagination, fueled by the eerie silence and the cold. The next night, I was still on edge, but determined not to let my fear get the best of me. As I was about to fall asleep, I heard it again, the soft footsteps, followed by the whisper, "John." This time, the voice was clearer, almost familiar. I grabbed the knife from under my pillow and headed towards the sound. The corridor was empty, but I noticed something strange. The door to the attic, which was always locked, was slightly open. My parents had warned me never to go up there. The attic was old and filled with junk, but there was something more, something they never talked about. My curiosity got the better of me. I pulled the door open and climbed the narrow stairs. The attic was dark, the only light coming from the moon through a small window. The cold was even more intense up here. I could see my breath in the air. As I moved deeper into the attic, I saw an old trunk in the corner. It was covered in dust, and it looked like it hadn't been touched in years. I approached it cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. When I opened it, I found old photographs, letters, and a diary. The diary was my grandfather's, a man I had never met, but had heard many stories about. I sat down and started reading. The entries were strange, filled with ramblings about voices and footsteps, much like what I had been experiencing. One entry caught my attention. It spoke of a spirit, trapped in the house, longing for release. My grandfather had tried to communicate with it, but the entries stopped abruptly. I felt a presence behind me. Turning around, I saw a shadowy figure standing in the corner of the attic. It was just a silhouette, but I could feel its eyes on me. The fear was overwhelming, but I couldn't move. The figure started to speak, its voice a whisper. "Help me." I ran down the stairs, slamming the attic door behind me. I could still hear the whispering, growing louder, pleading for help. I knew I had to do something, but I was terrified. That night, I couldn't sleep. The whispering continued, haunting my every thought. The next day, I did some research on my grandfather. I found out that he had been involved in the occult, trying to communicate with spirits. He believed that the spirit in our house was someone who had died tragically and was trapped between worlds. I decided to find out more to see if I could help. I went back to the attic, this time during the day. The presence was still there, but it felt different, less menacing. I sat down and started reading the diary again. My grandfather had written about a ritual to release the spirit, but he had never completed it. I knew I had to try. That night, I prepared for the ritual. I followed the instructions in the diary, setting up candles and drawing symbols on the floor. As I began the ritual, the air grew colder, and the whispering became louder. The shadowy figure appeared again, watching me. I recited the words from the diary, my voice trembling. The figure moved closer, its whispers becoming a deafening roar. I felt a force pulling at me, trying to stop me, but I pushed through, finishing the ritual. The figure let out a scream, then disappeared. The house was silent. The cold dissipated, and the oppressive feeling of being watched was gone. I felt a sense of peace for the first time in days. I knew I had done the right thing, helping the spirit find its way. My parents never knew what had happened. I kept the diary and the knowledge of the spirit to myself. But from that night on, I felt a connection to my grandfather, a man I had never met but whose actions had shaped my life. I knew that I had done something important, something that had brought peace to our home. And in doing so, I had faced my fears and grown stronger. Even now, years later, I remember that cold winter night. The fear, the whispers, and the shadowy figure are etched into my memory. But I also remember the sense of accomplishment and the knowledge that I had helped a lost soul find peace. It was a night that changed my life forever. 2. It was a cold, moonless night, and I was alone in my aunt and uncle's sprawling countryside home. They had asked me to house sit while they were away on a trip, and I had eagerly agreed, thinking it would be a peaceful retreat from the chaos of city life. The house was isolated, surrounded by acres of dense forest, far from any neighbors. It had a certain charm during the day, but at night, it took on an eerie, unsettling aura. I had settled into the cozy living room, lost in a gripping mystery novel, when I heard it, a faint but distinct sound of footsteps crunching on the gravel outside. My heart skipped a beat. I set the book down and listened intently, trying to convince myself it was just an animal or the wind. But the footsteps continued, slow and deliberate. Curiosity and fear battled within me, but curiosity won out. I tiptoed to the window, peeking through the heavy curtains. Darkness stared back at me. I couldn't see anything beyond the faint glow of the porch light. Trying to shake off the sense of dread, I remembered the security cameras my uncle had installed around the property. Maybe they could give me a better view. I rushed to the study where the security monitor was set up. My hands trembled as I switched it on and cycled through the various camera feeds. The front yard, empty. The driveway clear. The garden, nothing. But then, I saw it. A shadowy figure standing still as a statue by the back door, staring directly into the camera. My blood turned to ice. The figure was tall and shrouded in darkness, its face obscured. Panic surged through me. I quickly locked all the doors and windows, double-checking each one. I turned on every exterior light, hoping to scare off whoever or whatever was out there. I grabbed my phone, my fingers fumbling as I tried to dial 911. Before I could hit the call button, the porch light flickered and went out. My breath caught in my throat. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. Suddenly, the figure was no longer on the camera. I spun around, and there it was, standing right outside the living room window, its face pressed against the glass, eyes locked onto mine. I screamed, a sound that seemed to tear through the silence of the house. I bolted for the bedroom, slamming the door behind me and locking it. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears as I pressed my back against the door, trying to steady my breathing. The darkness in the room felt suffocating. Every creak and groan of the house seemed amplified, feeding my terror. Minutes felt like hours as I waited, my phone clutched tightly in my hand, ready to dial the police at the first sign of trouble. Finally, I gathered enough courage to call 911, my voice shaking as I explained the situation to the operator. They assured me that officers were on their way, but until then, I was on my own. I stayed on the line with the operator, whispering updates as I listened intently for any sounds from outside. The wait was agonizing. Then I heard it, a soft tapping at the bedroom window. I didn't dare move. The tapping grew louder, more insistent. Took every ounce of willpower not to scream. Finally, the sound of sirens pierced the night, and flashing blue and red lights filled the room. The tapping stopped abruptly. I heard the front door being forced open and the heavy footsteps of the police officers moving through the house, calling out to me. Relief washed over me as I unlocked the door and rushed out to meet them. They searched the property thoroughly but found no sign of the intruder. The figure had vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared. However, they did find something that chilled me to the bone. Handprints smeared on the living room window, exactly where the figure had been standing. The prints were large, almost inhuman, and they seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. The officers took my statement and reassured me that they would patrol the area more frequently, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. To them, it was just another case of a young woman spooked by her imagination in a big, empty house. But I knew what I had seen, and those handprints were proof that it was real. My aunt and uncle returned the next day, and I told them everything. They were shocked and concerned, but they tried to comfort me, saying it was probably just a prank or a drifter passing through. Still, they couldn't explain the handprints. My uncle wiped them away, but the memory of that night stayed with me. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every shadow seemed to move. Every creak made me jump. The peaceful retreat I had imagined turned into a nightmare I couldn't escape. I left the house as soon as my aunt and uncle returned, grateful to be back in the safety of the city. Years later, I still think about that night. The terror, the figure, the handprints. It all feels like a twisted dream, but I know it was real. I often wonder who or what that figure was and what it wanted. Sometimes, I even find myself looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see those dark, piercing eyes staring back at me. People say the mind plays tricks, especially when you're alone in the dark. But I believe some things are beyond explanation, lurking just at the edge of our understanding. That night taught me to trust my instincts, to never ignore that primal sense of fear. Because sometimes, the monsters we fear are all too real, waiting for the perfect moment to remind us that they're always there, watching and waiting. 3. It was a quiet, unassuming evening when my worst nightmare began. My parents had gone out for the night, leaving me alone in the house. I was used to it. Being an only child meant many nights spent in solitude. But something about that night felt different. There was a certain weight to the air, an unspoken tension that made every shadow seem darker, every creak louder. I had always had a fear of the basement. It was a place of darkness and dampness, filled with hidden corners that my imagination populated with all sorts of terrors. The very thought of going down there alone sent shivers down my spine. But that night, fate had other plans. I was in the living room, lazily flipping through channels on the TV, when I heard it. A dull thud, like something heavy falling, echoed from the basement. My heart skipped a beat, and I froze, listening intently. Maybe it was just something shifting, I tried to convince myself. But the sound was too deliberate, too unsettling to ignore. Reluctantly, I grabbed a flashlight and made my way to the basement door. The creaky wooden stairs seemed to stretch endlessly into the darkness below. With each step, my fear grew, and I had to force myself to keep moving. The beam of my flashlight cut through the thick darkness, revealing cobwebs and stacks of forgotten boxes. When I reached the bottom, I saw what had caused the noise. One of the old shelves had toppled over, spilling paint cans and tools across the floor. I let out a sigh of relief, thinking that was all there was to it. Just an old shelf finally giving way. But as I turned to head back up the stairs, I heard it, a whisper, barely audible, coming from one of the dark corners of the basement. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. There was no answer, just the oppressive silence. I pointed the flashlight towards the corner, and there, standing in the shadows, was a man. His clothes were ragged, his hair matted, and his eyes wild with a desperate intensity. He looked like he hadn't seen the light of day in years. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or speak. The man took a step forward, his eyes locked onto mine. In that moment, I knew I had to get out of there. I turned and bolted up the stairs, taking them two at a time. My heart pounded in my chest as I slammed the basement door shut and locked it. I grabbed the phone and called the police, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial the number. The operator tried to calm me down as I explained what had happened. Minutes felt like hours as I waited for the police to arrive, all the while hearing faint noises from the basement, as if the man was trying to find a way out. When the police finally arrived, they searched the basement thoroughly. They found signs that someone had been living down there for quite some time. A makeshift bed, scattered belongings, and empty food cans. But the man was gone. He had slipped away into the night, leaving behind only the chilling evidence of his presence. The officers reassured me that they would patrol the area and keep an eye out for the intruder, but their words did little to ease my mind. The thought that someone had been living in our basement, hidden away, watching us, was too much to bear. I never felt safe in that house again. For weeks, I couldn't sleep properly. Every noise, every shadow sent me into a panic. I would check and recheck the locks on every door and window, but it never felt like enough. The fear had settled deep within me, a constant reminder of how vulnerable we truly are. My parents tried to comfort me, but they were just as shaken. They couldn't understand how someone could have lived right under our noses without us noticing. It was a violation of the worst kind, one that shattered our sense of security and turned our home into a place of fear. Over time, the fear became a part of me. I learned to live with it, to cope with the anxiety that followed me everywhere. But the basement remained a place I couldn't face. The door stayed locked, and I avoided it as much as possible. The incident left me with a profound sense of unease about the world. It made me question everything I thought I knew about safety and security. If someone could live in our basement without us knowing, what else could be lurking in the shadows of our lives, unseen and unknown? Years later, the memory of that night is still vivid in my mind. The wild-eyed man, the terrifying realization that he had been living beneath us, the helplessness I felt. It all stays with me. It changed the way I see the world, making me more cautious, more aware of the hidden dangers that might be lurking just out of sight. People often dismiss fears like mine as irrational, but I know better. I've seen the dark side of reality, the hidden horrors that can exist right under our feet. It's a lesson I wish I hadn't learned, but one that I carry with me every day. Because sometimes the monsters are real, and they're closer than we think. In the end, that night taught me a harsh truth about life. We like to believe we're safe within the walls of our homes, that nothing can harm us in our own sanctuary. But the reality is, safety is an illusion. There are dangers we can't see, threats we can't predict. And sometimes they come from the places we least expect. So now, I live with a heightened sense of awareness, always on guard, always prepared for the unexpected. It's not a pleasant way to live, but it's necessary. Because once you've seen the darkness, you can never go back to living in the light. The fear is always there, a shadow that follows me, a reminder of the night I learned the truth about what can happen when you least expect it. Meet Sarah. Like many of us, she used to dread bedtime, hours spent tossing and turning, waking up groggy and irritable, and worst of all, her relentless snoring that not only disturbed her sleep, but her partner's as well. Desperate for a solution, Sarah tried everything. New mattresses, white noise machines, even sleeping pills. Nothing worked until she discovered our breathing for sleep routine. One particularly frustrating night, Sarah stumbled upon an article about the power of breathing to improve sleep. Skeptical but willing to try anything, she read about our breathing for sleep routine. A simple, scientifically backed method designed to clear sinuses, enhance breathing, and eliminate oxygen blockades. It promised to guide users through a simple breathing routine for the best sleep of their lives. Intrigued, she decided to give it a shot. As she began the routine, Sarah immediately felt her sinuses clear. She followed the step-by-step guide, learning how to breathe deeply and correctly. Within minutes, she noticed a significant difference. Her breathing was smoother, more relaxed. That night, she fell asleep faster than she had in years and, incredibly, stayed asleep all night. One of the most astonishing benefits was the end of her snoring. The routine included a simple breathing hack that stopped her snoring in minutes. Sarah learned that her habit of mouth breathing was activating her survival mode, preventing her from achieving truly restful sleep. By switching to nasal breathing, she deactivated this mode and allowed her body to fully relax. The next morning, Sarah woke up feeling refreshed and rejuvenated. She couldn't remember the last time she felt so well rested. Her partner noticed the difference too. No more middle-of-the-night disruptions from her snoring. The transformation was remarkable, and Sarah knew she had found something special. Sarah's story is not unique. Many others have discovered the life-changing benefits of our breathing for sleep routine. Imagine falling asleep quickly, sleeping soundly through the night, and waking up feeling fully rested. No more snoring, no more grogginess, just deep, restorative sleep. Are you ready to transform your sleep like Sarah did? Our breathing for sleep routine is easy to follow and starts working immediately. Clear your sinuses, enhance your breathing, and remove oxygen blockades with our guided routine. Say goodbye to snoring and hello to the best sleep of your life. Don't spend another night tossing and turning. Experience the power of proper breathing and reclaim your nights. Try our breathing for sleep routine tonight and wake up to a new, refreshed you. Because everyone deserves the gift of deep, restful sleep. Check out the link for this wonder in the description and the comments. Thank you for joining us on this harrowing journey. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tales of terror. Until next time, stay safe and beware the shadows.